I'm Ken Stapleton with the University Park Alliance. And I want to welcome you and thank you all for coming out tonight for our final public discussion around our Parks and Recreational planning efforts for University Park. Before we get started, I actually think it'd be really helpful if everyone just introduced themselves and why you're here or who you're affiliated with. And if we could just go around the room real quickly and do that. I'll start with our great colleague here from the city, Mark Moore.
Mark Moore, City of Akron, just representing the city on the partnership with the University of Park.
Thomas from Davis I'm here at University Park.
Dave Nelson, community activist.
Beth House from University Park Alliance.
Jeff Engro, Center for Nonprofit Excellence.
Glenn Ernie, just a homeowner by the park.
Pam Walker, representing Congresswoman Betty Sutton.
Lisa Bostwick, I'm with the Akron Cooperative.
Larry Parker, I'm with the Akron Cooperative.
Ann Akins, I'm Interview Associates, Art Director. Edward Chambers, Community Activist. Yolanda Parker, with Community and Family Services.
Barbara Brown with Summit Federal Credit Union. Linda Dodson with Summit Federal Credit Union. Art Bennington from Upson University Park.
Terrific. Well, thanks everybody again for being here. I know some of you were at our previous meetings. We had three kind of more hands-on discussions around dreaming about parks and recreation at University Park and reacting to some of the preliminary concepts that the city staff had really come up with and to their analysis. And the main purpose of our meeting tonight is to come back to you and kind of share with you, based on what we heard, what we think we ought to do going forward, how we think we ought to invest in parks and recreation in University Park in the near future and in the long term. So let me just run through a lot of this. We've had great leadership by city staff, and they've done a great job of doing analysis and some of the drawings and everything else that you're going to see here today. So they've really been the key partner in all of this. Those community meetings I discussed were very expertly facilitated by Jeff Engro with the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. We've also been soliciting web-based or internet-based feedback through a site at ohio.com in partnership with the Akron Beacon Journal. And as we've mentioned in the past, we have at least $350,000 to invest in parks and recreation in the short term in University Park. I want to remind everyone that we were not focused on one or two parks. We are focused on all the different parks and all the different kind of recreational systems from around University Park. And so that's why this map is up here. You can see that the city did a great job of kind of outlining that there are certain parks that have bigger circles, certain parks that have smaller circles because they're smaller parks. And then where we sit today has a very large circle that actually even serves areas outside of what we call University Park. So we're trying to look at this as a system and trying to look at it as a whole collection of great opportunities for parks and recreation going forward. So what did we hear on the internet and in those meetings? We heard very clearly from you and from others that more and better facilities and programs are needed to encourage recreational activity and play throughout this neighborhood. That we really kind of were coming up short when we thought about it. We didn't have what we really needed to move forward. We definitely heard lots of great ideas, many ideas for improvements. And in the process, by voting with your dots, for those of you who are here and voted with dots, you helped us identify at least some of the priorities. You also were very clear with us that you had a number of concerns about the existing facilities and even about how we might improve the facilities going forward. Your dreams and wishes list, if you picked up, hopefully you picked up one of these when you came in. This is something you get to take home with you. Who doesn't have one of these yet? Beth, could you make sure everybody gets one of those? We tried to capture everything that you told us, and we had to use 3 or 4 columns on the page to try and pick it all up. But in this slide here, you can see that, clearly we heard you say you want community gardens, you want more lighting, you want more youth programming, you like these walkways, these rubberized walkways and benches, you like kind of picnic kinds of opportunities. things we called play fountains were something very interesting, and the water-based things. Even got a lot of votes for a swimming pool, which was very interesting to us. But also public art and more events in some of our parks, including possibly a stage area, which is what this is supposed to be a picture of. It doesn't cover the whole list, but the point is you came up with a lot of really good, interesting ideas for ways that we can improve our parks. And even some other areas that aren't parks, in terms of how we improve play and activity. But you also shared with us some of your concerns and your fears. And there are two key ones that we kind of really focused in on. Number one, it was very consistent message, top priority message, that safety is an issue in most of our parks. Whether it's real safety or perceived safety. Safety keeps people away from our parks sometimes. It keeps people from being as active as they might be. So we heard you loud and clear, and we've given a lot of thought to that. The second very clear message that you sent to us was that parks need to be open and accessible and welcoming to all different groups. Every park should be welcoming to all the different groups. And so no park should only be for University of Akron students to play sand volleyball. And they shouldn't so dominate a park that either the people with families and small children feel like they can't go there, or the elderly feel like they can't go there. Same goes for basketball courts. Men should not dominate basketball courts, you told us. That there should be a very easy way, and that women and girls should feel just as welcome on basketball courts as men do. You also told us that people who are homeless should not dominate a park, or that youth gangs or groups of youth should not so dominate a park that others don't feel welcome or don't feel like they really belong. So we took those two things very much into consideration as we tried to figure out what kinds of investments we needed to make, both physical facilities and programs going forward. So here's what we think. Overall, big picture kind of thinking. Number one, there are a lot more wishes than there are money. That didn't surprise us, and that's okay. Because in the short term, we've got a certain amount of money, but in the long term, we think we can actually go and get more money. Clearly, safety is a top priority, but we also think in bigger ways that if we create this plan and kind of agree on what it is we think our parks and recreation should be like in the long term, that we're going to be able to take that plan and go back to investors and funders and civic-minded people and help attract the dollars that we need to make even the improvements we can't make in the short term. And then finally, based on kind of the level of feedback that we got, and kind of the way that feedback energized us during this process, that we really need to come back to you probably annually, maybe every 2 years, but at least every 2 years, but maybe every year, and kind of have the same conversation, at least in some way, not as extensively, but at some point, we just got to come back and ask you, okay, we did some stuff, how's it working? And what do we really need to focus on next? And have we changed the way we're thinking long term about our parks and recreation in this neighborhood going forward? We've divided our recommendations up into phases. Phase one is what we think we have enough money for initially. And then long term will be what we want to get done as we agree to it and then are able to attract additional resources and partners. The big things, and we'll go through this in much more detail, but the big things in terms of what phase one is going to constitute, at least in these recommendations, is to completely rebuild Boss Park. It's kind of torn up right now, and it's bigger now, so it's been expanded. And we think that's going to cost us around $200,000. It's not going to be cheap. We want to rebuild the fields, baseball and multi-purpose, baseball, softball, Little League baseball, softball, here at Mason Park. And we think that's probably going to run us around $80,000.